In the movie The Matrix, Morpheus is talking with a young guy called Neo, and he says to him, "You've got a vague feeling there's something wrong with the world." And he offers him a choice of taking a blue pill or a red pill. Now, the blue pill is one which, if he takes it, will not change his perceptions at all. He can continue to be gaslighted by the media and spend his time watching Netflix, or if he takes the red pill, his eyes will be opened. And as he says, you take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. In this video now, I'm giving the first part of a proposed curriculum for a red pill university. And in this one, I'm going to talk about why has the West gone downhill so fast? And secondly, about cultural Marxism. Okay, why has the West gone downhill so fast? Well, my first point is the widespread abandonment of Christianity. And don't shout, don't get all upset. The fact is that Christianity is the fundamental basis of our Western civilization. It created our culture, and since so many people have abandoned it, they replaced it with something, and that something is relativism and nihilism, belief in nothing. Now, what is culture? Culture, as I understand it, is shared understandings about how the world works, shared beliefs, shared observances, and shared values. In October 2012, during the Festival of Dangerous Ideas in Sydney, ABC Q&A program showed us an American intellectual, Jesse Bering, delivering this piece of postmodernist nihilism. Free yourself of the illusion of God. There's no such thing as good and evil, and there's no such thing as free will. Wow. Now, this is a complete cop-out from taking personal responsibility for the consequences of our own decisions. You can blame society, anyone but yourself. And as in Dostoevsky's novel, Demons, which is about a terrorist revolutionary cell in the 1870s, the leader Kirillov says, "If God doesn't exist, then I am God." That means in effect that you can make up your own morality, you can do whatever you like, or as the British Satanist Aleister Crowley once said, "Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law." The second point as to why our Western civilization has gone downhill so rapidly, particularly in the last 10 years, although the beginnings of this are more than half a century ago, we've accepted a negative assessment of our own history, and we've ignored, or been prepared to ignore, the West's achievements, which are magnificent. In Australia, we're being subjected to a black armband view of our history, an anti-colonial and anti-capitalist emphasis. And you hear constantly from malcontents, always was, always will be Aboriginal land, and even calls to rename our major cities. A third point is we've had mass immigration from the third world, especially of Muslims, but also increasingly from Africa. Multiculturalism has been accepted by many people since Al Grasby in the 1970s as an ideology that denies the host culture, says we don't have a culture, and tolerates practices that are incompatible with our own culture and our laws. We see the rise of a cult of diversity with the junking of concepts of merit in favour of quotas. In the United Kingdom and the United States, we're seeing the allowance of Sharia courts and recognition of Islamic law. Even the previous Archbishop of Canterbury conceded recognition of Islamic law. That's a destruction of British culture. And in France and Sweden and elsewhere in Europe, you're seeing quite a large number of no-go areas, where the police can't go and have been accepted by the state insofar as it doesn't go in and towel them up. The next point is we've lost confidence in ourselves. We've lost a lot of our national pride. We've had gender and identity politics destroying national unity and dividing us into competing tribes. This replaces what previously was the class war of the communists. Now it's gender and identity politics and critical race theory. Now you look at this about what's happening in the West, and you compare with modern day Russia, which is devoid of cultural pessimism. It treasures its national monuments, it's re-embraced Christianity, it's strongly rejected cultural Marxism's attacks on the family and national identity. Russia is in a much better position to make it than we are. The next point is woke ideology, the infestation of political correctness. Now, what does political correctness do? It destroys honesty in our conversation and in our social interaction. Instead, we have to use non-sex language. You can't make ethnic jokes, all sorts of things, which in fact take away our spontaneity and our love of life. Another point is the rise of radical feminism, particularly the third wave of radical feminism. This has moved from being just a push for equal rights and voting and so on, to attacks on men and devaluation of their role in family and society. This is a denial of the very nature of men and women and our separate sex roles. Another point is many of us have lost faith in our institutions, in our political parties. How many of you believe what you hear from this party or that party or another party? How many of you have you got faith in our politicians? Very few. We've lost faith in our education system, many of us, mainly because it's been captured by people who propagandise rather than teach basics. We've lost faith in the media. The mainstream media are frequently called purveyors of fake news, and that's absolutely true. We've also, many of us, lost faith in the judiciary because it has been corrupted by a whole mindset which gives priority to the perpetrators of victims of crimes over the victims of crime. Another point is so many of us have been sucked into pursuing or thinking that they're good socialism and collectivism, the devaluation of competitiveness and the pursuit of excellence. Unfortunately, too many people today who are sucked into this, particularly young people who've gone through the universities, have no historical memory of the atrocities perpetrated by socialism and collectivism in Eastern Europe and the Soviet Union, and now in China. And finally, many churches have also been corrupted by leftism, cultural pessimism, and theology which is feel-good rather than based on the Bible. The next major topic I want to talk about is cultural Marxism. Now, some of you probably haven't even heard the term cultural Marxism, and that's a worry, because cultural Marxism is the disease which has gone right through our Western society. It is the ideological driver behind political correctness. I'll give you some background. In 1919, shortly after the Communist Revolution in Russia, the Bolsheviks founded Comintern, the Communist International. And two Marxist theories, Antonio Gramsci from Italy and George Lukács from Hungary, concluded that the Christianized West was the obstacle standing in the way of a communist New World Order. And they decided that the West would have to be de-Christianized by a long march through the culture, starting with the traditional family and completely engulfing churches, schools, media, entertainment, look at Hollywood today, civic organisations, literature, science, and the revision of history. Max Horkheimer, one of the people from what came to be called the Frankfurt Institute, said the revolution won't happen with guns, rather it'll happen incrementally. Year by year, generation by generation, will gradually infiltrate their educational institutions and their political offices. He means both the major political parties, transforming them slowly into Marxist entities as we move towards universal egalitarianism. In 1923, Lukács established the Institution for Marxism in Frankfurt, later known as the Frankfurt School. Lukács said, "I saw the revolutionary destruction of society as the one and only solution." Note that the destruction of society, the end of civilization as we knew it. A worldwide overturning of values cannot take place without the annihilation of the old values and the creation of new ones by the revolutionaries. Now, the Frankfurt School spawned critical theory, which is the destructive criticism of Western culture, including attacks on Christianity, capitalism, authority, the family, patriarchy, morality, tradition, sexual restraint, loyalty, patriotism, nationalism, heredity, ethnocentrism, and conservatism. Critical theory repeats over and over this mantra of alleged Western evils: racism, sexism, colonialism, nationalism, homophobia, fascism, xenophobia, imperialism, and of course religious bigotry. But they only ever apply that to Christianity, never to Islam, for example. All blame for societal and economic ills was to be shifted to the West, and this would lead to cultural pessimism, when a person grows to loathe the society which nurtured him and provided him unprecedented levels of success. Racism is the current flavour of the month. The ABC in Australia and our Human Rights Commission see it everywhere. California State University, Northridge, pushes critical race theory in a 5-year mentor training program about, quote, structural and historical racism and its ties to our everyday lives. It brainwashes people into hating their own culture. Ashley Shackelford, who's a Black Lives Matter activist in the United States, says all whites are evil, all whites are racist, and she asks for personal reparations. So the main aims of the Frankfurt School were the creation of racism offences, the continual change to create confusion, the teaching of sex and homosexuality to children, the undermining of schools and teachers' authority. Now, of course, it's parents' authority. Huge immigration to destroy national identity, the promotion of excessive drinking, emptying of churches, an unreliable legal system with a bias against victims of crime, dependency on the state for state benefits, control and dumbing down of media, encouraging the breakdown of the traditional family, abolishing differences in the education of boys and girls, and declaring women to be an oppressed class and men as oppressors. Now, to escape from Hitler, the Frankfurt School relocated to various campuses in the United States, starting off particularly with Columbia University, and then later on some of them went to California. In 1950, Theodor Adorno of the Frankfurt School proposed the idea of the authoritarian personality, in which he claimed that Christianity, capitalism, and the traditional family create a character prone to racism and fascism. Now, that is why Antifa calls conservatives and patriots Nazis or fascists. Frustrated at the persistent lack of interest by the Western working class in revolt, Herbert Marcuse asked the question, who could substitute for the working class as the agent of revolution? And he came up with this idea: marginalised groups, including black militants, feminists, homosexual militants, the asocial, the alienated, and third world revolution is represented by the mass murderer Che Guevara. Cultural terrorism, political correctness, was now going to be waged against white, Christian, capitalist, heterosexual males, who were going to be called racist, bigots, Nazis, homophobes, Islamophobes, and so on. And victim groups were to be defended. Gays, blacks, women, also now Muslims as alleged victims of racism and genocide. And also more recently the environment being raped by white capitalists. Now altogether these constitute the politically correct coalition, and the Greens in Australia represent them to a T. These victim groups are the basis of the gay studies, black studies, women's studies, peace and conflict studies and so on departments that now infest universities along with the so-called green left. None of those departments encourage genuine critical thought. They peddle only a one-sided agenda of destructive pessimism about Western culture. And in the picture here on the right, it's a real one of a woman who's complaining about her situation in life. She's done an MA in Women's Studies, and she says, "I have a Master of Arts degree in Women's Studies. However, the only job I can find is as a bartender in a local restaurant. I owe $60,000 in student loans and so on and so forth." Well, the question is, and what had she intended on doing with that MA in Women's Studies? What's that got to do with the real world? Another thing that came from Herbert Marcuse of the Frankfurt School is endless permissiveness. He wrote a book in 1955 called Eros and Civilization, which promoted free love and the pleasure principle, giving rise to the mantra of the late 1960s onward, "Make love, not war," and "If it feels good, do it." And that then led to the drug counterculture of the late 60s and 70s, particularly pushed by Timothy Leary from the University of California. This is very subversive of the work ethic and the pursuit of excellence, with his turn on, tune in, drop out. Cultural Marxism now riddles the institutions of Western society, especially universities and the public media. Political correctness and linguistic fascism now intimidate and suffocate a lot of political discourse. It afflicts virtually all of our political parties, not just the left. In Australia, the Liberal Party is full of people who pursue these ideas. The advance of cultural Marxism has been hugely helped by the spread of postmodernist nihilist ideas, including the denial of absolute truth, the denial of absolute standards, cultural, religious and moral relativism, assertion that life is meaningless, tolerant non-judgmentalism, which means in effect having no standards, and a deterministic view of life. What a miserable thing we've exchanged Christianity for. Cultural Marxists teach that all truth and morality are relative, that the end justifies the means, which of course is the fundamental ethic of all totalitarian systems. They teach that the bedrock institutions of society are only power relationships, and that people's status and fortune in life are determined by class and gender and so on, and that people have no free will or ability to take moral responsibility for their life decisions. This promotes a victimhood mentality and encourages parasitic dependency. How far have we fallen? And to sum up this presentation, a short definition of cultural Marxism is the destructive criticism and undermining of all institutions of Western civilization and the traditional values underpinning it.